ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੈਂਸਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੇ ਇਨ ਟ੍ਰੈਂਡਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਇਸ ਸੈਂਸਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਰ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਜੁੜ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ ਫਰਮ SALDEF ਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ। ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਜੋਤ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
So good to have you, Jyot Singh, Policy and Research Manager at SALDEF, the Sikh American Legal and Legal Defense Education Fund. SALDEF ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੇ viewers ਸਾਰੇ ਵਾਕਿਫ ਹਨ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਅਪਲਿਫਟ ਅਤੇ ਇੰਪਾਵਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹੋ, ਸਿਵਲ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਅਤੇ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ। ਬਟ ਦਿਸ ਰੀਸੈਂਟ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਡੇਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੇ media houses, publications and government houses ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਇਸ discussion ਬਾਰੇ SALDEF already research ਕਰ ਚੁੱਕੇ। In fact, your censorship report addresses exactly this issue. Jyot, you are one of the individuals, the authors, co-authors of this report. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੀ research ਆਪ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। Before we even get to the report, give me a high-level perspective of ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, how this is not the first time.
Yeah, at a high level, the Indian government in recent years, in recent decades, in fact, has developed a very high level of savviness as far as their ability to manipulate the internet and manipulate social media to basically switch the lights off and be able to commit a lot of human rights abuses and violations in such a way that the world cannot see and the world cannot watch. So what we saw in the Punjab Farmers Protest, as you're seeing the censorship report and our takeaways, is exactly this. The Indian government was able to use its power over these companies and use its control over their profits in this market to basically force them to both shut down honest conversation among the diaspora and among the Punjab community in India, while amplifying fake news and disinformation and falsely connecting the protest to goals and people who were not involved and were not being sought. So this is nothing new. The current situation in Punjab is nothing new. The Indian government actually leads the world at this point in internet shutdowns. And it's a very tried and true playbook where by switching off the discourse, by making sure that those who want to speak honestly about situations cannot speak about these situations on the internet, they cannot communicate, while the government and while sympathetic accounts advance government narratives, we find ourselves in this position over and over where the rest of the world continues to believe that India is the world's largest democracy, but the government very deliberately and very consciously takes away basic rights like the right to protest peacefully, like the right to assembly, like the right to free speech online. And the frustration continues to mount in many respects because there's not a ton of accountability for the government in all of these situations. They are effectively getting away with it.
Jyot, before we get into some of the key findings of this report, and I really look forward to hearing them, sharing them with our viewers, ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਮੈਂ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸੋ, because just for argument's sake, to play devil's advocate, ਜੋ ਆਵਾਜ਼ਾਂ ਇਹ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਦੇਖੋ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਇੱਕ ਸੇਫਟੀ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਬਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਪਾਲ ਦੀ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਲੋਕੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਭੜਕਾਊ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੱਧ ਰਿਹਾ, ਸੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੇਫਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੀਜ਼ਰਵ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ measures ਲਿੱਤੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ that an internet shutdown is to keep people safe. So how do you, in your research, how have you come across data and statistics and information to counter that point ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ safe ਰੱਖਣ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨਾਲ connect ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਰੋਕਣਾ justified ਹੈਗਾ?
That's a good question. I would say that it's hard to see a safety argument for preventing people from speaking honestly with one another, right? It's hard to see a safety argument when the internet is shut down so the people who are being occupied cannot speak truly on the internet to one another, but the Indian government continues to use those channels. So if there was an idea that the internet shutdown is for safety, then the Indian government should not be on the other side enjoying this asymmetry where they get to advance their narratives, they get to have these conversations globally, they get to push their version of the truth while shutting down others. If it was really a question about safety, then the Indian government would not be leaning into the same tools that they prevent the people of Punjab from using, but they do. So it's not about safety, it's about power, it's about control, it's about asymmetry, it's about the fact that the Indian government is aware that a lot of these social media platforms are so desperate for profits and to maintain those profits that they will allow these asymmetries to exist, that they will allow the government to push its narrative while shutting down any narrative otherwise. And they will not do the groundwork or the legwork or the research. So I would say it's not about safety. And the data bears that out. All the data that we found suggests strongly that the Indian government actually tends to use Indian government and government-linked accounts tend to use social media more when situations like this happen, when safety is the reason that the people can't speak. So,
what an interesting paradox कि एक पासे तुसी आम पॉपुलेशन ने एक चीज़ बिल्कुल बैन कर रहे हो बंद कर रहे हो बट दूजे पासे उस चीज़ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ज़्यादा इस्तेमाल कर रहे हो so you're saying that in this report जो by the way मैं दर्शਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ saldef.org ਤੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਆਪ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ so you're telling me ਇਸ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਡਾਟਾ ਦੱਸਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਨੂੰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਪਰੈਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਦ ਉਹਦੀ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਬੰਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਸਾਈਮਲਟੇਨੀਅਸਲੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਵੇਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਅਤੇ ਸਰਕਾਰੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਅਕਾਊਂਟਸ ਦੀ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀ ਵੱਧ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ you've seen this
Absolutely. In the farmers' protest, you saw this with Amit Malviya, one of the most prominent BJP officials online, probably the architect of the BJP's IT cell. He was posting so often and so consistently that he became the first Indian politician who was flagged by Twitter for using manipulated content with the intent to deceive. Now, obviously, the Modi government fought this. But yeah, literally while the people of Punjab and the farmers and the diaspora were not able to speak truth as to what was happening, were being taken down for inciting violence, BJP IT cell was more active than normal. So yeah, absolutely. This is not, if it was about safety, everybody would be off the internet. But no, it's about one narrative and the supremacy of Hindutva ultimately online, and not at all about the safety of the people of Punjab.
You know, you shared a little bit of information with me, Jyot. I'm really interested to learn what more findings this censorship report brought out. It take a choti ji break ਲੈਣ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ. Please don't go anywhere. Viewers, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ. Censorship ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਜੋ current situation ਹੈਗੀ, ਇਹ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਹਾਦਸਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਪਹਿਲਾ instance ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. ਇਹਦੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੰਬੀ ਚੌੜੀ history ਹੈਗੀ and ਉਸ history ਬਾਰੇ डेटा जो कंपाइल किया गया है ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ब्रेक ਤੋਂ ਉਸ ਪਾਰ ब्रेक ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰ ਸਿਵਲ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ SALDEF ਸਿੱਖ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਲੀਗਲ ਡਿਫੈਂਸ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਫੰਡ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਰੀਸੈਂਟਲੀ ਇੱਕ ਸੈਂਸਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਉੱਤੇ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕੰਪਾਈਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਡੇਟਾ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਕਰੰਟ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੀਂ ਹੈਪਨਿੰਗ ਕੋਈ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਇੰਸਟੈਂਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਟੈਕਟਿਕਸ ਨੂੰ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਇਸ ਇੰਸਟੈਂਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਯੈਸ ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨੋਟਿਸ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਬਟ ਐਟ ਦੀ ਐਂਡ ਆਫ ਦ ਡੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਟਰਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਸ ਪੈਟਰਨ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣ ਲਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਸ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਹੀ ਹਥਿਆਰ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਬਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਅਤੇ ਤੋੜਨ ਲਈ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਆਥਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁਣ ਜੁੜੇ ਹਨ ਜੋਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੋਤ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਬੈਕ ਟੂ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ Washington DC ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ I love DC especially in this time of year when the cherry blossoms come ਜੋ ਹੁਣ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਹੈ so the people that live there get to enjoy it It's wonderful. Jyot, tusi, as part of your work with SALDEF, Policy and Research Manager, tusi a report compile kiti hai, you and Ekasa Suri. And ਇਸ report ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ study farmers protest ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ similar tactics ਨੂੰ censorship ਨੂੰ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ. So let's go through some of your key findings.
Absolutely. The key findings ultimately is that this is a very, very established playbook for the BJP. And in fact, the BJP has become so good at this that they're almost the envy of authoritarian governments the world over. And the biggest finding is that it's that asymmetry. I use that word a lot, but the reason I use that word is because it's a very conscious application of uneven standards. It's the idea that when a group of people, say the Sikhs of Punjab, are experiencing an event like the Farmers Protest, they find themselves unable to speak truth to power. They find themselves blocked by these social media companies, by these decision makers at social media companies for things like incitement to violence. At the same time, the Indian government and government-controlled accounts and government-affiliated accounts are able to share whatever they want with impunity. So it's the simultaneous spreading of misinformation and disinformation from the government, while taking advantage of the fact that social media platforms do not do the groundwork, they do not build the cultural competency, and they effectively take the government's word for it. So the biggest takeaway is it's really effective. It's highly effective because at this moment, economically, these companies are desperate for profits. So they are consciously trading principles, democratic principles, like, for instance, protecting free speech, free assembly, peaceful protest, and instead they're shutting down and allowing the Indian government to shut down any conversation that does not advance a state narrative. And we see this, it's not just Punjabi Sikhs, for the record, it's Christians in the South have dealt with this. Any minority community that puts a toe out of line finds itself silenced online as the Indian government moves in and engages in intensely anti-democratic behavior.
Jyot, you mentioned earlier, ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਹੁਣੇ ਕਿ India has a track record as globally one of the largest offenders when it comes to internet shutdowns, purposeful internet shutdowns. ਇਸ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ, ਉਸ ਡੇਟਾ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ viewers ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕੀਤੀ, how for the last 5 years consecutively India's has the highest number, and the number has gone up. I believe there was 84 shutdowns in 2022 alone. And ਇਸ incident ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਜੋ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ statistics ਸੀਗੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ focused ਸੀ in terms of where the shutdowns took place. But you're right, after Kashmir, Punjab ranks pretty high on that list, as well as certain other parts of the country jithe ek anti tusi keh lo controlling party sentiment zyada paya janda hai. Why do you think hun jaake do is particular instance bare ਵੱਡੀ media publications ਅਤੇ entities, whether it's the BBC, CNN, New York Times, ਉਹ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਸ blackout ਬਾਰੇ articles ਅਤੇ ਵੱਖ pieces ਛਾਪ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, but they are drawing attention to this fact. What, in your opinion, do you think is different? Is it the sheer size of this blackout, or is this trend ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ farmers protest ਤੋਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, that something about ਜੋ ਇਹ Sikh censorship ਹੈਗੀ and ਜੋ Sikh struggle ਹੈਗੀ, that is now being picked up by mainstream media?
Yeah, I think a lot of the credit goes to the diaspora. I think a lot of the credit goes to people in the UK, the US, Canada, who are really trying to elevate the conversation, really trying to counter what the Modi government is able to do with the complicity of these technology platforms. I think it's a lot of reasons. I think perhaps in the best case, I think perhaps some of our work has primed the pump in a sense and created more interest and susceptibility to this narrative. But ultimately, I think you're right. I think it's scale. I think it's the fact that 27 million people were cut off from mobile internet for at least 48 hours for a manhunt for one individual. That is the kind of egregious abuse of power that you can't really cover up. It's hard to spin that number. And so I think that this is an overreaction, frankly, by the Indian government to Amritpal Singh's recent behavior successes, whatever word you want to use. And it is such an overreaction that it is really difficult, I think, for the BJP to spin this as anything but overkill, anything but an infringement of civil rights of an entire state, a large number of people in the name of one man. Because I think you look at the farmers' protest and they could say, okay, well, we have X, Z issues, there's this many farmers, but a manhunt for one individual resulting in 27 million people losing access to the internet is on its face, it's a difficult thing to spin. It's difficult to portray as anything other than what it is, which is a government abusing its levers of power and engaging in very anti-democratic behavior to try to bring one individual I say
Yep.
justice, not really what they consider justice.
Jyot, ਤੁਸੀਂ diaspora ਦੀ unwavering activism ਬਾਰੇ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕੀਤਾ, ਰਾਈਟ, ਕਿ ਨਿਡਰ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਜੋ ਬਾਹਰਲੇ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਨ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ 'ਤੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਬੋਲਦੀ ਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਐਂਡ ਮਾਡਰਨ ਡੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਟਵਿੱਟਰ, ਰਿਮੈਂਬਰ ਟਰੈਕਟਰ ਟੂ ਟਵਿੱਟਰ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ even today, it is very vocal about what's going on. What more can we do though, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ activism ਅਸੀਂ SALDEF ਵਿੱਚ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ? What more can you suggest, especially at this time right now, that our viewers can say, yeah, I can work on that too, I can do that too?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing that Sikhs who are citizens of other countries, Western countries, can do is they can elevate this issue to their representatives. Because one thing we see, and the reason India engages in these blackouts, is because India enjoys a very rarefied status in Western capitals as the world's largest democracy, or as a counterweight to China in Asia. And that is simply not true. That is a narrative that has never been true, but especially in this moment with this administration, India is not a democratic state. And so the fact is, what you can do is you can say to your representative in the States, you can say to your member of the House, your member of your senator, you can write a letter and you can say, look, you need to understand what India is and what India isn't. You need to understand that if you're a minority in India, your rights are not protected. Your rights are not respected. Your rights are taken away at the drop of a hat, right? On one fine Saturday morning, the government could cut you off from the internet with no warning, simply because they feel like it. So I think that the BJP is very conspicuously protecting this reputation. They enjoy this reputation. They want to exploit and use it because it allows them to be neutral in international affairs. And it's simply not true. And I think that citizens of other countries, truly democratic countries where representatives must listen to their constituents, should be lighting up the lines. They should be on the phone. They should be writing emails. They should be writing letters. They're obviously welcome to reach out to SALDEF and ask for guidance in this. We're happy to assist. But you, as a citizen of another country, your representative must listen to you. And it is really important that before any change can be made, before any proper sanctions, for instance, can be placed, this reputation that the Modi government continues to protect with internet blackouts and social media blackouts must be dismantled. And it is the citizens of these countries who are in position to say to the representatives, India is not what you think it is. And you need to understand what actually happens to minority communities like mine on a very regular basis. Because until there's a real awareness of what India is, we can't make lasting change in its relationships, and we can't bring leverage and power to bear from these other countries in which we sit. So I would say that's where you could, as to your question, what you could work on is making sure that the people whom you vote for, especially during election cycles, right, at the local level, in the House elections, there are opportunities to speak to candidates. And I think the community as a whole should engage to a greater extent in these elections, in this civil process, to be able to actually elevate the Sikh story and the concerns and fears of the diaspora. Because at the moment, it's almost a default. Everyone says, oh, before I speak about India, I must first say it's a vibrant democracy. And it's not. And we, as minorities who know exactly what that anti-democratic tendency is, it's on us, really, to educate the people who wield power in these countries to understand what India is.
If I'll close with one thing, I think I'll take your line. We have to elevate the Sikh story and the Sikh struggle, which still continues in such an egregious degree, like you said. Jyot Singh, thank you so much. Tuhade is research paperly, this research report that you have compiled alongside Akasa Suri with SALDEF, censorship of Sikh voices. एक बारी फिर मैं दर्शकों ਨੂੰ insist ਕਰਾਂਗੀ saldef.org ਤੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. There's some really great statistics, great information in there, and ਇਹੋ ਜੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਦੂਜਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਟੋਰੀ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਟਰਗਲ ਬਾਰੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡੇਟਾ ਦਿਖਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ that the numbers don't lie. Once again, Jyot Singh, thank you so much for your time. Have a good rest of your evening and enjoy those cherry blossoms. Sat Sri Akal.
Thank you so much. Sat Sri Akal.